Hello everyone, welcome to Market Voice. Yesterday we have seen a few details from the Warfield wisdom book, The Art of War. There are about 13 chapters in which SunTzu discusses about war strategies, how to plan and execute the war, what are all the tactical dispositions that we need to keep in mind, how do we really assess the whole situation and all of those things. So all of these information that is given in the book The Art of War is also relevant for our trading activities. So here is an attempt that we are trying to make to see how we can map or understand those wisdom and equate it to our trading activities and see how we can benefit out of it. Yesterday we discussed about the first 5 chapters in the book. The first chapter was about laying the plans, which means planning for any activity is the first and foremost thing. Whether it is trading, whether it is war or any other activity, you need to first plan your activities. The second chapter is all about waging the war, which also means here for our trading purposes it is executing the trades. The third chapter was about attack by stratagem, which means how do we strategize, what kind of strategies we deploy in our trading activities. The fourth chapter is all about tactical dispositions, which means how we can, while deploying our strategies, what tactical aspects that we need to keep in our mind. And the fifth one was about energy, which means the resources and the faith behind our own activity of trading. So what kind of resources we need to deploy, what kind of faith we need to put in our systems, all of those things will form part of energy chapter. The next 5 chapters that we will see today, the 6th chapter is about assessing the weak points and the strong points, which means like in war, they assess their own strengths and weaknesses, and also they assess the opponent's strength and weaknesses. Here in our trading activities, at least it is difficult to assess the strength or the opposition of or the weaknesses of the opposition there, because it is a digital world. We don't know we are pitched against whom. So that being the case, it is important we know our own strengths and weaknesses. We need to assess where is our forte lies, what is our strong point, whether it is psychological setup is our strong point, whether our trading setup itself is a strong point, whether we have a very robust and very good risk management system, where do we lack, what is that we are regularly prone to make mistakes. So these are the aspects that we need to list down and make an assessment of our own strengths and weaknesses before we enter into the battlefield. So that is, we will see more details in each of these chapters as we go along. Here we are just highlighting the chapter details and what is to be expected out of those chapters. The 6th chapter is all about understanding the weak points and the strong points. The 7th chapter in the book The Art of War discusses about maneuvering. Here, how is maneuvering helpful for us? We need to maneuver our trades. We need to maneuver or manage our resources, which is our own capital. We need to navigate among different strategies. We need to work with limited resources in terms of knowledge, in terms of experience, in terms of resources or capital. So we are always working with limitations. So we need to know how to navigate or how to maneuver among these narrow path of trading and make some decent returns out of it. So the 6th chapter is about understanding our own strengths and weaknesses. The 7th chapter is about maneuvering or managing these limited resources. 8th chapter talks of variation in tactics in war. At the time of beginning of the war, maybe like we may have to go with one strategy, but as we go along, as we enter into the war, then we might realize the strategy that we had initially thought of might not be working, and we may have to adopt a different strategy. So the 8th chapter talks of tactics as we go along. You have already in the trade, maybe your trade is not working out, maybe you have to revise your thought process, and maybe it is time now to adopt a different strategy. So whatever is the case, those details, how do we understand what is the warfield wisdom regarding changing of tactics, and how we can adopt those changing of tactics methodologies into our trading activities is what we will see in the 8th chapter. And the 9th chapter talks of the army on the march. While you are in the trade, you should know, you are already like the army on the march is like when the trade is set or the war is set, they reassess their, as they go along, how much of resources is left, how much of army soldiers are killed, what has happened, how many of them are injured, and how much of the resources are left for them to manage or wage the war further. Very similarly, while we are in the trade, once we are into one trade, then we know like our capital is again shrunk, and one part of the capital is already stuck with one of the trade, and we need to reassess what is the remaining capital, what are the other opportunities that are coming in the market, and then see how we can take positions in those respective trades or strategies, or as and when the trading signals emerge. So that is with respect to the army on the march. 10th chapter talks of terrain, very important. What is the terrain? In warfield it is more important because you should know what kind of terrain the enemy frontier is. If you don't know what kind of terrain it is, then it becomes difficult for you to make your strategies. So here also, like in the warfield, you might know like some of the terrains are very hilly region, sometimes you will go through a very flat region. So you should know what kind of resources you need to deploy if it is a very hilly or very different or very difficult terrain, or if you are going on a smooth or plain battlefield. Sometimes you may have to encounter a lot of rivers and water bed areas. You have to, how do you cross the rivers, how do you cross the oceans, or how do you cross big seas, what kind of strategies you need to adopt when you have to cross the borders. For example, when Sita was stuck in Lanka, Rama assesses the situation and he builds the Rama Setu. So that was the need of the hour, because he had to pass through the water frontier, he had to cross the ocean to reach the Lanka. So at that time, what kind of strategies he need to adopt. But when he comes to Kishkinda first, at Kishkinda level, it is a very plain terrain. From there on, he moves on to the border and he sees there is a big ocean that is in front of him, and only when he crosses the ocean will he be able to reach Lanka. So he had to change his strategies, reassess the whole thing and see how best he can navigate the whole terrain and reach into the required territory. So all of those details come under the chapter terrain. So these are the 10 chapters that are there in the art of war. There are 3 more chapters which we will look into the details of them tomorrow. Until then, Om Swasti.